On a chilly winter night, a quiet street became the scene of an unthinkable crime. Sophia and Michael had been married for 5 years, and to everyone around, they seemed like a happy, normal couple. But behind closed doors, there were secrets hidden deep within their relationship, secrets that no one saw coming. Sophia recently found out she was expecting a baby, but there was something about her news that changed everything. She revealed to Michael that the child wasn't his. Shock turned to anger, and within moments, things spiraled out of control. What started as a revelation led to a tragic decision. Michael's rage took over, and the scene quickly went from tense to terrifying. In his mind, Sophia's betrayal was too much to bear, and before the night was over, she lay motionless. Michael, who once promised to love and protect her, became her killer. Family, friends, and neighbors were left in disbelief. How did a moment of truth lead to such a brutal end? How did things go so wrong in a relationship that once looked so loving? Detective Lewis was assigned to the case, and he knew this wasn't just any crime. He had to piece together the story, from the smallest clues to the chilling final moments of Sophia's life. He spoke with those who knew the couple, looking for answers to understand why Michael acted the way he did. Stay with us as we uncover the shocking story of betrayal, anger, and loss. This is a story of love turned to hatred, trust shattered, and a family forever changed by one night's actions. What could drive a husband to kill? The answers may be closer than you think. Sophia met Michael when they were both in their early 20s. Their relationship started with the usual joy and excitement of two people in love. They went on dates, talked for hours, and seemed inseparable. People around them admired their bond and looked forward to seeing them together. A couple of years into their relationship, they got married, and from the outside, everything seemed perfect. Friends and family would see them as the ideal couple, always supportive and happy with each other. But like many relationships, things weren't always as they seemed on the surface. In the early days of their marriage, Michael showed traits of being a caring husband. He would bring home small gifts, offer to help around the house, and talk about their future together. Sophia thought she was living her dream, and to her, Michael was the man who would stand by her side forever. But soon, cracks began to show in their relationship. Michael started to display controlling behavior, little by little. He would ask her to tell him where she was going, who she was with, and what she was with, and what she was doing, even if it was just with her family or close friends. Sophia found it strange, but she brushed it off, thinking it was just his way of showing concern. As the months went on, Michael's questions became more demanding. He grew more controlling, dictating what she could wear, which friends she could see, and even how she should speak to others. Sophia tried to keep the peace by following his requests, hoping it would make things better, but Michael's controlling ways only worsened. The tension between them grew, and Sophia felt like she was losing herself. She found herself walking on eggshells around him, always trying not to do or say anything that might upset him. One evening, after a small argument, Michael became visibly angry and raised his voice, something he hadn't done before. His calm and loving demeanor from their early days together seemed like a distant memory. Sophia was caught off guard and wasn't sure how to respond. She tried to talk calmly and asked him why he was acting this way, but Michael just left the room without answering. From that day on, their arguments grew more frequent. Michael's temper became something Sophia learned to expect, even though it terrified her. As time passed, the love and warmth that once filled their home seemed to fade away. Their conversations became shorter, filled with tension and unresolved issues. Sophia felt trapped in a marriage that had turned from love to control and fear. She wanted to speak up and share her struggles with her family, but she didn't want to worry them. She held on to the hope that Michael would change, that he would go back to being the caring man she fell in love with. She kept silent, thinking that things would eventually improve. Then, Sophia made a decision that would change her life. She started reconnecting with her old friends, people she hadn't seen in years due to Michael's restrictions. It was during one of these meetings that she became close to a man who showed her kindness and respect, qualities she hadn't felt from Michael in a long time. They spent time together, sharing stories and laughter, and for the first time in years, Sophia felt understood. Their friendship grew stronger, and eventually they developed feelings for each other. Sophia, who had once dreamed of a happy life with Michael, found herself wondering if she had made the right choices. Several months later, Sophia discovered she was pregnant. At first, she was filled with joy, thinking about the new life she was carrying. But as reality settled in, she felt a deep sense of fear and uncertainty. She knew the child wasn't Michael's, and she couldn't hide that fact forever. After days of anxiety and sleepless nights, Sophia decided she needed to tell Michael. She hoped that he might understand, that maybe they could find a way to work through it. On a cold evening, Sophia sat Michael down, trying to gather her courage. She took a deep breath and told him the truth about her pregnancy and the affair. She wanted to be honest, believing it was the best way forward. Michael's face changed instantly. His expression went from shock to rage within seconds. He couldn't believe what he was hearing, and his anger was like nothing Sophia had seen before. She tried to explain, hoping he would listen, but Michael's rage grew. Without a word, Michael stood up and left the room, slamming the door behind him. Sophia sat alone, her heart pounding, feeling a mix of fear and sadness. She knew this news had hurt him deeply, but she hadn't expected this level of anger. In the following days, Michael barely spoke to her. He moved through the house like a stranger, keeping his distance, his anger lingering in every glance. The once peaceful home was now filled with silence, broken only by the occasional argument that ended in slammed doors and tearful nights. Sophia's hope for forgiveness and understanding faded with each passing day. She began to feel unsafe, sensing a change in Michael that made her nervous. She started thinking about leaving, but the fear of what he might do held her back. As days turned into weeks, the tension only grew. Michael's resentment was evident in his every action. Sophia, now carrying a child, lived in constant fear, not knowing what would happen next. She had shared her truth, hoping for a chance to rebuild, but now she found herself trapped in a home filled with anger and danger. The darkness that had slowly crept into their marriage now surrounded her entirely, leaving her with a feeling that her life was slipping out of her control. As the weeks went by, Sophia became increasingly tense around Michael. She tried to go about her daily routine as normally as possible, but every move she made seemed to make Michael angrier. He would watch her silently, his gaze hard and unrelenting, as if he was holding back something much darker than just anger. She avoided being alone with him whenever she could, but there was only so much she could do within the walls of their home. Each day, the silence between them grew heavier, and Sophia felt like she was constantly walking on the edge of something dangerous, something she couldn't fully understand. One evening, Sophia was in the kitchen preparing dinner, trying to focus on the simple tasks in front of her. She heard Michael's footsteps behind her, but she didn't turn around. She didn't want to look at him, afraid of the expression she might see on his face. Suddenly, without warning, he spoke, his voice low and chilling. He told her that she had ruined everything, that she had taken the life he had dreamed of and destroyed it with her betrayal. His words were cold, stripped of any warmth or love that might have once existed between them. Sophia felt her stomach twist in fear, realizing just how much Michael's resentment had grown. Over the following days, Michael's behavior became even more erratic. Sometimes he would ignore her completely, as if she didn't even exist, while other times he would make bitter remarks, reminding her of what she had done. Sophia tried to keep herself together, but the constant tension was taking its toll. She felt exhausted, unable to sleep, her mind filled with a sense of dread that something terrible was going to happen. She thought about leaving, but the fear of what Michael might do if he found out made her stay. She felt trapped, alone, and completely helpless. One night, as she lay in bed, Sophia's thoughts wandered back to the early days of their relationship. She remembered how kind and attentive Michael used to be, how he had made her feel safe and loved. But now, that man seemed like a stranger, someone who had been replaced by the cold, angry person she now lived with. She wondered if she would ever feel safe again, if she would ever be free from the fear that now followed her every moment. She closed her eyes, hoping for sleep, but her mind refused to quiet down, and the hours stretched on in silence. The next morning, Michael's mood seemed different. He was unusually calm, almost detached, as if he had made a decision about something important. He went about his day without speaking to her, his face blank and unreadable. Sophia tried to gauge his mood, but there was nothing for her to hold on to. It was as if he had shut down completely, locking away any trace of emotion. She couldn't help but feel that this calmness was somehow worse than his anger. It felt like the silence before a storm, and she could sense that something was building up inside him. Later that day, as they sat down for dinner, Michael looked at her with an intensity that made her heart race. He didn't say anything at first, just stared at her, as if searching for something. Then, in a voice that was disturbingly calm, he asked her if she regretted her actions. Sophia was taken aback, unsure of how to respond. She wanted to tell him that she was sorry, that she hadn't meant to hurt him, but the words got caught in her throat. Instead, she looked down at her plate, feeling the weight of his gaze on her, and muttered a quiet apology, hoping it would be enough to calm him. But Michael wasn't satisfied. He pressed her for more, demanding to know why she had betrayed him, why she had brought this shame upon him. Sophia tried to answer, her voice trembling, but each word seemed to fuel his anger. He told her that she had taken away his pride, his dignity, and that there was no way for her to make up for what she had done. His voice grew louder, and Sophia felt a sense of panic rising inside her. She wanted to leave, to escape, but she was too afraid to move. In the days that followed, Michael's anger became even more intense. He stopped pretending to be calm, and his bitterness turned into open hostility. He began to lash out verbally, accusing her of ruining his life, of making him a laughingstock. Sophia tried to stay out of his way, but the house felt smaller with every passing day. She couldn't escape the tension, the feeling that Michael was watching her, waiting for something. She felt like a prisoner in her own home, with no way out. One evening, as Sophia sat alone in the living room, she heard Michael approaching from the hallway. She braced herself, expecting another confrontation, but he walked past her without a word. She watched him disappear into the darkness, her heart pounding as she wondered what was going through his mind. She couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was about to happen, that this silence wasn't a sign of peace, but a prelude to something far worse. Sophia knew she was running out of time, but she didn't know what to do or where to go. That night, as she lay in bed, she felt a sense of dread like never before. She knew she had to find a way to protect herself, to escape the nightmare her life had become. But as she drifted into a restless sleep, the weight of fear pressed down on her, trapping her in a world where safety was nothing more than a distant memory. Sophia didn't know it then, but the decision Michael had made would soon bring their story to a tragic end. The storm that had been building was about to break, and there would be no turning back. The day that would change everything began quietly. Sophia tried to avoid Michael as much as possible, sticking to the bedroom or kitchen and moving quietly around the house. She was on edge, her nerves stretched thin by the constant tension. Her mind was exhausted from thinking through escape plans that seemed impossible. She felt trapped in her own home, unable to take a step without fear of triggering Michael's anger. She knew things had reached a dangerous point, and yet she still hoped he might calm down and let her leave in peace. But deep down, she sensed something else was about to happen, something she couldn't prevent. Late that afternoon, Michael came into the kitchen, where Sophia was cleaning up after a meal. He looked calm, almost too calm, as he watched her for a moment, silent and still. His calmness was eerie, unsettling, and made Sophia's heart beat faster. She kept her head down, hoping he would leave, but he remained there staring. Finally, he broke the silence by asking her a question. It was simple and direct, asking if she still wanted to leave. Sophia was caught off guard, unsure of how to answer. She could feel her throat tighten as she searched for the right words, hoping to diffuse whatever anger was brewing inside him. Sophia finally nodded, confirming that she wanted to leave. She thought that honesty was her best option, that maybe he would understand. She explained how she felt trapped, how she needed to start fresh, and how she couldn't continue living this way. As she spoke, she avoided looking directly at him, her voice barely above a whisper. She couldn't see his reaction, but she felt a change in the room, a tension that was growing stronger with every word she said. Michael remained silent, and the calmness on his face slowly shifted to something darker, something she had feared all along. Without warning, Michael's calm expression turned into one of rage. He stepped toward her, his movements quick and sudden. Sophia took a step back, feeling the countertop press against her back, as she realized there was nowhere left to go. The look in Michael's eyes was terrifying, filled with a fury she had never seen before. She felt her heartbeat pounding in her chest, each beat filled with fear. She tried to reason with him, but he was beyond listening. The anger that had been simmering for weeks had finally reached its breaking point, and there was no calming him now. Michael's voice was loud, each word filled with venom, as he accused her of betrayal, of destroying everything they had built together. Sophia felt frozen, unable to respond, her mind racing as she searched for a way out. She glanced at the door, but it felt miles away, unreachable in that moment. She was trapped, cornered by the very man she had once loved, a man who was now driven by a dangerous rage. She could sense that there was no turning back, that his anger had taken over completely, leaving no room for reason or compassion. As the moments passed, Sophia's sense of fear grew stronger, her instincts telling her to run, to find a way to escape. She tried to push past him, but Michael blocked her path, his hands gripping her shoulders tightly. She struggled, her mind racing with panic, but his grip was unrelenting. Her heart sank as she realized she was completely at his mercy, trapped and helpless. The tension in the room was suffocating, each second passing in slow motion as she fought to break free. Sophia's vision blurred as she struggled, her mind a whirlwind of fear and desperation. She could feel her strength fading as Michael's grip tightened, his anger consuming every inch of him. In that moment, she realized that there was no escaping his rage, no calming the storm that had overtaken him. The silence that followed was deafening, a final cold stillness that filled the room as everything went dark. Sophia's world faded into darkness as Michael's rage consumed him. The silence was heavy and cold, filling the once familiar kitchen with an eerie stillness. Time seemed to stop as Sophia's last memories blurred, her mind too overwhelmed to process what was happening. She had always sensed that something terrible might come, but she never imagined it would end this way. Her thoughts drifted, a final quiet moment in a world that had turned against her. After what seemed like an eternity, Michael released his hold, stepping back and looking around the room in silence. The scene in front of him was one he couldn't process, as if he was waking from a nightmare. His hands shook as he took in the reality of what he had done. Sophia, the woman he had once loved, lay still on the floor, the life that had once filled her eyes now gone. He felt a strange mixture of emotions, anger, guilt, and confusion, all colliding in his mind, leaving him frozen in place. As the shock began to wear off, Michael's mind raced through the events leading up to this moment. He thought about the anger he had held inside, the betrayal he couldn't accept, and the hopelessness that had taken over. He had always thought of himself as in control, someone who could handle anything. But now, standing in the quiet of his own kitchen, he realized just how wrong he had been. He knew he couldn't undo what had happened, and the weight of his actions pressed down on him, filling him with a fear he had never felt before. After a few moments, Michael began to think about what he would do next. Panic set in as he realized the consequences of his actions. He couldn't stay here, he couldn't let anyone see what had happened. His mind scrambled for a plan, any way to escape the reality he had created. He thought about leaving town, starting over somewhere else, but he knew it wouldn't be that simple. He would always carry the memory of this night with him, no matter where he went. With his mind clouded by fear, Michael moved quickly, trying to clean up the evidence of his actions. He wiped down surfaces, cleared away anything that might link him to the crime. He worked methodically, his movements mechanical, driven by the instinct to survive. He wrapped Sophia's still body in a blanket, carrying her out to his car under the cover of darkness. Every step felt surreal, as though he was watching himself from a distance, detached from the reality of what he was doing. Michael drove to a remote area outside town, a place he had visited once in passing. The silence in the car was oppressive, each second ticking by slowly as he glanced around, paranoid that someone might see him. He parked the car and looked around, making sure the area was deserted. The weight of his actions pressed down on him again as he carried Sophia's body from the car, moving quickly to avoid detection. His heart pounded as he found a secluded spot, desperate to leave the nightmare behind. He left Sophia's body there, hidden in the darkness, hoping that no one would find her, at least not soon. His hands shook as he got back into the car, driving away as fast as he could, the night closing in around him. His mind was blank, too overwhelmed to process what he had done. The road stretched out before him, a lonely path away from the life he had destroyed. As he returned to the house, Michael felt a strange numbness settle over him. He moved through the rooms, erasing any trace of Sophia's presence, trying to create the illusion that she had never been there. He gathered her belongings, packing them away, erasing her from the life they had once shared. His actions were cold, calculated, as he removed every memory of her from the home. He knew it wouldn't be enough, but he had to try. He couldn't bear the thought of anyone discovering the truth. In the days that followed, Michael told friends and neighbors that Sophia had left him, that she had decided to go somewhere new, to start fresh on her own. He played the role of a heartbroken husband, a man abandoned by his wife. His voice was steady, his expressions practiced, as he told his story over and over, hoping that no one would see through his facade. He kept his distance from those who asked too many questions, always careful to maintain the illusion he had created. But beneath the surface, Michael was haunted by what he had done. Every night he replayed the events in his mind, unable to escape the memory of that final moment. He saw Sophia's face in his dreams, her eyes filled with fear, and woke up drenched in sweat, unable to escape the guilt that gnawed at him. He thought he could hide the truth, that he could start over, but the weight of his actions clung to him, a constant reminder of the life he had taken. As the weeks passed, Michael began to unravel, his mind clouded by the guilt he couldn't shake. His friends noticed the change, the quiet distance he kept, the way his eyes seemed haunted by something unseen. He tried to keep up appearances, but the strain of carrying his secret was more than he could bear. Each day felt heavier than the last, the memory of that night a shadow he couldn't escape. In his moments of solitude, Michael began to question everything, wondering if he could ever truly live with what he had done. He had thought he could move on, but now he realized that his actions had marked him, that he could never return to the life he had known. The guilt that filled him was relentless, a reminder that no matter how far he ran, he would always carry the memory of Sophia's final moments with him. The life he had tried to rebuild was nothing but a hollow shell, haunted by the truth he couldn't escape. Days turned into weeks, and Michael tried to maintain his life, as though nothing had changed. He stuck to a routine, going through the motions of his daily activities, but inside he was breaking down. The memory of that night followed him everywhere, casting a dark shadow over every moment. He felt trapped by his own mind, haunted by the actions he had taken, yet he couldn't escape them. His mind replayed the final moments with Sophia again and again, each time more vivid than the last, as if he was still there, unable to move forward. Rumors started to spread among friends and neighbors. People began noticing Sophia's sudden absence, whispering about why she hadn't been seen in so long. Some thought she had simply left to start a new life elsewhere, while others sensed something more sinister. The concerned friends who reached out to Michael found him distant and evasive. His responses were brief, his explanations vague, leaving them with more questions than answers. He had planned to keep his story simple, but he struggled to cover every detail, each question making him feel more cornered. One day, Sophia's close friend decided to visit Michael directly. She wanted answers, unable to believe that Sophia would just leave without saying goodbye. Her visit caught Michael off guard, and he struggled to keep his story straight under her sharp, concerned gaze. She pressed him for details, asking where Sophia had gone, why she hadn't been in touch, and if everything was all right. The pressure mounted, and Michael's carefully crafted facade began to slip. He couldn't control the anxiety building inside him as her questions continued, his mind scrambling for a way out. After the visit, Michael felt himself spiraling further. He knew he couldn't keep up the act forever. Sooner or later, someone would uncover the truth. The walls were closing in, and he felt trapped by the consequences of his actions. The guilt and fear grew stronger each day, taking a toll on him both mentally and physically. He became paranoid, constantly looking over his shoulder, convinced that someone would discover his secret. Every knock on the door, every unexpected phone call sent waves of panic through him, as if they were signs that his time was running out. Then came the moment he had dreaded. Local authorities, alerted by Sophia's friend in her unexplained absence, began investigating. They arrived at Michael's house, asking questions about where she had gone and why he hadn't reported her missing. His initial responses were defensive, claiming she had left on her own, that she had wanted a new start. But the investigators weren't convinced. They sensed something was wrong, noting his nervous demeanor and the inconsistencies in his story. Their suspicions grew, and soon, the investigation into Sophia's disappearance became official. As the search for answers continued, detectives began gathering evidence. They visited friends and neighbors, piecing together Sophia's life and the last time anyone had seen her. They interviewed those who had known her well, gathering information about her relationship with Michael and the recent tension in their marriage. Each detail painted a clearer picture of the troubled relationship and the growing distance between them. They began to realize that Sophia's sudden disappearance was more than just a case of someone leaving without a word. It was a case that demanded deeper investigation. Days turned into weeks as detectives worked tirelessly, collecting every bit of information they could. They obtained phone records, examined financial statements, and searched for any sign of communication from Sophia after the day she vanished. As they combed through the evidence, they found nothing that supported Michael's story of her leaving. It became clear that something far more serious had happened, and Michael was now the primary suspect in her disappearance. The pressure mounted, and Michael knew he couldn't avoid the truth much longer. The day finally came when police executed a search warrant on Michael's property. They went through every room, every corner, looking for clues. It wasn't long before they found traces of evidence, small yet undeniable signs that pointed to a violent struggle. Blood traces were discovered, hidden but detectable, and they began connecting these findings with the timeline they had constructed from witness statements and phone records. Each new piece of evidence brought them closer to the truth, a truth that Michael could no longer hide from. confronted with the mounting evidence, Michael's composure broke. The weight of the investigation, the guilt he had carried, and the realization that he couldn't escape led him to confess. He recounted the events of that night, his voice shaking as he spoke of the anger, the confrontation, and the fateful decision that had led to Sophia's death. He admitted to hiding her body, to attempting to cover up his actions, hoping he could live with what he had done. But as he spoke, it was clear that he was already a man haunted by his choices, unable to find peace. Following his confession, the authorities located Sophia's remains, bringing an end to the mystery that had haunted her friends and family. The news spread quickly, and those who had known her mourned the tragic loss, grappling with the senselessness of what had happened. Michael was charged with her murder, and the trial that followed brought the full story to light, revealing the deep pain and turmoil that had existed behind closed doors. In the end, Michael's attempt to hide the truth had only delayed the inevitable. The life he had tried to cover up unraveled, and he was left to face the consequences of his actions. Sophia's story became one that lingered in the minds of those who had known her, a reminder of the darkness that can exist beneath the surface and the tragic consequences of unrestrained anger.